Good morning. Happy Monday. Just chilling out with one of the kitty cats here. Um, well, it's been all over the news. Donald Trump is threatening to use the National Guard in Portland, Oregon. Is this a prudent use of an arm of the military, federalizing the National Guard to protect federal installations, federal property, federal buildings, vehicles, and federal agents? Or is it a blatantly unconstitutional overreach and potentially a violation of the Posse Comitatus Acts? I think that the president needs to handle this a bit with a bit of diligence. In Washington D.C., um, which is a federal enclave, the president had a lot of latitude, even though the city of DC has home rule, which I believe was a huge mistake made more than 50 years ago. But nevertheless, most of that is federal territory. There are a lot of federal buildings, and the president is the commander in chief. DC is not a state. So he can use the National Guard for certain things. He has a little bit wider of a latitude there. But Portland, Oregon is a whole different animal. Portland is a city within the state of Oregon. I think Salem is the capital, but Portland is probably the biggest city right on the coast. Um, the city of Portland has its own police department. The surrounding county, which I believe is Multnomah County, has a sheriff with a lot of deputies. And the Oregon State Police have troopers who serve at the behest of the governor. So they obviously have the resources available to handle any disturbance or criminal activity that comes their way. But we have a case where the mayor apparently ordered the police to stand down and not assist or cooperate in any way with ICE agents or other federal officers. Now, that brings several other questions come up. Okay, well, what are the hooligans doing? Is it Antifa? Is it BLM? Is it, um, you know, what is it? Sin Fronteras or Without Borders or whatever they call that group. Who are these people involved in attacking federal facilities? Are they local criminals or are they part of a bigger, um, a well organized, well funded group that communicates very well and goes from city to city? Is it Antifa? I don't know. But a lot of these people involved in these so called protests tend to be from outside the area. So they're obviously using vehicles to get there. They're having some sort of way to eat while they're there. That costs money. They have to have gas for their vehicles and they're staying in lodging. So somebody's paying for this. I don't know how you get to the bottom of it, but I suspect it might be George Soros or Alex Soros or somebody, one of these people in the shadows we don't really hear about very much, funding this. You have these people show up dressed in the similar manner. They're carrying the same type of weapons. They march in the same type of formation. They carry the same banners. And that seems to be the case whether you go to New York, Los Angeles, um, you know, uh, Baltimore, wherever these people show up, they seem to be very, very well. Somebody knows what they're doing. There's a hierarchy there. And you'll have people say, well, Antifa is just an idea, it's not an organization. Well, yeah, it's not like joining the Elks Club or anything. It's not like joining the American Legion where you get a membership card. But these people communicate, cell phones, social media, or whatever. They seem to be able to muster a lot of people to get to whatever area they choose very quickly. So do these people not have jobs? Are they independently wealthy? Are they students who cut class? A lot of unanswered questions. But back to the original issue. If there are federal buildings that are under assault, people throwing rocks at them, trying to start fires, they're throwing rocks at agents, they're blocking vehicles, and otherwise engage in activity like that. And the Portland City Police either cannot or will not respond. The Multnomah County Sheriff, I guess he's got other things going on, so he doesn't do anything about it. And the governor of Oregon has control, she has hegemony over the state police force, which is quite sizable. It's a big state. Um, and she doesn't do anything. And she had quoted one time that something about a burning building, a building burnt down means less than a marginalized person being offended, or something along that line. Okay, when you have somebody like that, that governor is derelict in their duty. Now, so what exactly does that leave if you have ICE agents or US Marshals or some other type of federal law enforcement operating within a city, enforcing federal law, which is what they're doing, and they're coming under attack, and the local police won't help, the sheriff won't help, the state troopers won't respond? That doesn't leave the president with a lot of options, but he still needs to be diligent with this. I can understand it would pass court muster if the president said, hey, we're going to send in the National Guard and they're going to be around federal facilities protecting them. Okay. Most people would probably, even if you don't like Trump, you know, and he says, I'm going to keep them around the facilities. Okay. People are probably going to be okay with that. And I suppose it would pass court muster. But what happens if, well, we're going to send the ICE agents on a raid and they're going to have US Marshals with them, and we're going to send the National Guard with them, and they're not near a federal facility. They're just there to protect the agents. I think a lot of people's hackles are going to go up, and there's a lot of potential for something going very wrong there. Um, you know, what if some agents get attacked and the National Guard responds, and their rules of engagement are different? National Guard is not really trained in regular police tactics. Now, they do have military police units, but most National Guard soldiers are not trained in law enforcement. They're trained for guerrilla warfare and military engagements, and sometimes putting down, they do have riot training. So there's a potential for something going very wrong there. But does it violate the posse comitatus statutes if the president protects federal property? I don't think so. My belief is no, that would be perfectly justified, especially when your state, county, and city law enforcement resources are denied and they say, well, we're not going to help you. Well, you know darn well that if the state had something that was really severe and they couldn't handle it, they would call in the federal government. So, but if they will not respond, even if they have the manpower, it puts the president in a tough spot. Now, if you bring in the National Guard and just have them doing general police work in a city, or you have National Guardsmen, um, you know, starting to stop people driving to and from work, you have National Guard doing checkpoints and things, then you're getting into really dicey territory, constitutionally, legally, and morally and ethically as well. You don't want the military involved in regular police work. That's something that we have to be very careful about it. I've also heard Memphis brought up, but the situation there was different. That was their own governor. Um, but what people who the Trump acolytes don't seem to understand is that every time they move to give the president more power because their guy is in the White House right now, you know, it's like, well, he's our guy and we want him to be able to own the libs. Oh, really? Well, what you're doing is you're establishing a precedent that you're giving power to somebody you like to do things, to do mean things to people you don't like on behalf of you. Okay. Well, what happens? years down the road, when you have a president you hate who uses that same power to do mean things to you on behalf of those people you don't like, you're going to be singing a different tune. And that's why, you got one team says, well, we need the government to do this. The other team says, well, we don't want to give the government that power right now until our guy is in charge. And the rest of us are sitting out here saying, you really shouldn't give that power to the federal government anyway. The Constitution has not been amended, and the posse comitatus statutes have not been repealed. And there's a huge potential for abuse. I'm not saying that President Trump has bad intentions. I understand the frustration and this lawlessness with Antifa, BLM, and these black bloc protesters, and these they call them anarchists. They're really not anarchists. They're more like disgruntled leftists. An anarchist hates government and is not generally going to attack an innocent person. They just pretty much want to be left alone. A lot of these people don't hate government. They just hate that they're not in charge of it. They're far left radicals. Many of them are communists. They love the idea of a strong government. They just don't like it because they're not in charge of it right now. And then you do have some on the extreme far right. But then again, those people are generally not the ones that go out and attack innocent people. That's mostly the left doing that, at least right now. Do we have dangerous far right extremists? Oh, hell yeah. But they're mainly people who are anti government. The Antifa hooligans are not only prone to attack government targets, but they go after ordinary people. They go after, they basically call everybody a fascist. They say they're anti fascist. They really are the fascists. With what they believe in their tactics, they're very similar to fascists. If you're a capitalist to them of any kind, you're a fascist. If you're a traditional Democrat or Republican, you're a fascist. If you're a libertarian, you're a fascist. If you're a federalist, a classical liberal, you're a fascist. If you believe in free markets, you're a fascist. What they've done is they have been indoctrinated that, I guess, the only bad people in the world were the quote unquote Nazis, and they were bad, but they're not taught about Castro, Pol Pot, Mao Zedong, Stalin, you know, who's the Chavez in Venezuela, he was kind of a neo-communist as well. But they're only taught that, like, well, if you're against them, then you're a fascist, even though they're more like a fascist than you are. The people who will say, well, you're a Nazi, but many of those same people say that when they're advocating socialism on a national level, but they're calling you a national socialist. Something doesn't add up, but it never does. You can't really have a logical discussion with those people. That's why they attack you. They spray you with stuff. They beat you. They shut you down. If you try and, if you have some World War II veterans out there in wheelchairs, they'll come and spit on them and dump urine on them and attack them and all that kind of stuff. But you never see them really do that you never see a bunch of Antifa people attack a group of able-bodied military-age men. Why is that? Yeah, they always have to outnumber people 10-1, and that they only try this stuff in big left-wing blue cities where they can get away with it because they know people are generally not going to be armed and they won't be able to protect themselves. But you don't see Antifa doing too much. You don't see them doing very many things in small towns in Georgia or Texas or Oklahoma or Arizona or places like that. Apparently at Sturgis, I think it's in North Dakota or South Dakota. There's a motorcycle rally up there. A couple of them showed up there and started something, and the sheriff basically took them into custody and said, "I'm taking you to jail to save your life because those bikers are going to kill you." And they did. They arrested those hooligans. I saw some of it on video. These guys were they were in way over their head, and the sheriff basically saved their lives by getting them out of there because those bikers are not they're not really a threat to you. If you don't bother them, they won't bother you. But if you go in there and bring some smoke, something bad might happen to you and you may never be seen again. And they're a different breed of people. But some of these Antifa and other type of protesters, they've gotten away with their antics for so long, and they've never been held accountable for it. And aside from Kyle Rittenhouse in Kenosha, Wisconsin, a few years back, nobody really stood up to him. And I fear that this could get out of hand pretty quickly. So, as far as the president is concerned, if he wants to send in the National Guard to protect federal property, I'm all for it. Um, but to start mission creep where you have the National Guard doing regular law enforcement stuff, even if they're backing up the police, there's just still a lot of potential for negative secondary and tertiary effects. The president needs to tread lightly on this because things can get out of hand very quickly. I do feel sorry for the people who live in Portland and Seattle and some of these other deep blue cities who have to get stuck with this, the noise, the vandalism, the riots, the assaults, the blocking traffic, all these people who have to live there who didn't vote for that. They're just ordinary people going about their lives. They don't want to be, they don't want to bother anybody else, and they don't want to be bothered. And then they get stuck up in this. And there's a dark side of me that says, well, you know what? Those cities voted for those people, so let them stew in it. But I can't really be that way because those people didn't all vote for that. They didn't all want that. And I live in a blue state, and we're in the middle of a gubernatorial race. And if statistics prove to be true, we're going to get stuck with a left wing Democrat governor. Okay. And she's going to do very bad things to the Commonwealth. Well, I live in a very red county. I sure as hell did not vote for her. So why should I be punished, along with the people who did? So I sort of see it from that angle. I have some compassion for those people who get stuck there, and that it's through no fault of their own. And not everybody can just pick up and leave. Sometimes you have family, you've got a mortgage, you're upside down in your house, you've got a job. You can't just pick up and leave and go somewhere else. Not everybody has the ability to do that. So, but yeah, an advice to President Trump. I know he's not going to listen to me, but be very diligent, sir. This has a potential to go badly very quick, and you need to keep things within constitutional and legal parameters. And you want to diligently let the people in those communities know that you do have their best interest in heart, and that you're not getting into a political tit for tat. Don't be drawn into that. The mayor and the governor and most people in that state hate you, but you're still their president, even if they didn't vote for you. And there are a lot of other people in those areas who did vote for you, but nevertheless, they're American citizens. And one of the main jobs of government is to protect citizens from criminal attack, be that a foreign invader or a domestic terrorist. And you've got the tools, just don't use a sledgehammer to kill a fly. That's all I can say. Anyway, I hope everybody has a great day and that your week is off to a great start.